I might actually get started in the interest of time because I don't really need the slides, to be honest. I'm just telling a little bit of a story. I might need to flick back over there and have a look to remind myself what I'm talking about at some point. So I'll quickly introduce myself. My name's Jim Pelletier. I'm a developer from Melbourne. I do things down there like on the alt.net user group. I'm also a tech lead of a team of about 5 or 6 people who work for a company called PageUp that make HR software. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about mob programming. Who's heard of mob programming here? Great, that's what I was hoping for. Who's tried it? Perfect. Who doesn't really think it's a good idea in the first place? We've got one person putting their hand up, great. So what I'm hoping to do today is tell you a little bit of a story about what happened when we first tried it, in the hopes that you might give it a try yourself, because I had some really good experiences with it. So what we did was we had a really difficult problem we wanted to tackle. We had a code base that the team had inherited. It had a really highly dependent object graph or class graph in there, and a couple of really big God classes in there as well that were causing us some real pain. It made it really difficult to reason about what was going on in the code. We had a specific problem where we wanted to try and track Git commits to hotspots in the code base as well to work out where our problems were. But with everything in this big file, we couldn't really do that. So we really wanted to break up the code we had. And we tried to do this a number of times before. I tried to do it on my own. Different pairs at different times had tried to do it. Individuals had tried to do it. Everyone gave up in the end. Normally what would happen is you would get too scared that something was going to break because you didn't understand the code base well enough, or you just get plain old burnt out. You know, if you're sort of trying to refactor large things and you haven't got a clear end in sight, at some point the resolve wavers and people just sort of give up. Got any luck? Any luck? I might just, I'm going to have to use a little bit for my notes, so I'll just come over here and we'll do it without slides. We'll go analog. So a little bit just about what mob programming is about, just for anyone who's not 100% across it. Basically, it's where the whole team works on code at a time. I've got some nice pictures of our team doing mob programming here, but you can't see, you just have to imagine it. We've got a really great setup in our office where we've got 2 dual monitor overhead projectors in the middle of our office, so we were set up really well for it in the first place. The whole team shares one keyboard. The idea behind this is that programming and software engineering is a brain-bound or a CPU-bound operation. It's not an I/O-bound operation, so the more brain power you can throw at a problem is better than more keyboards. So the way it works is there's a keyboard that passes between the programmers, usually on a timer about 5 minutes. The idea behind that is that you keep everyone's brain focused on the problem, because I might have to type in the next 5 minutes, so I need to know what's going on. I don't want to look stupid when the keyboard gets to me. The person typing also follows the instructions of the team. They don't make it up themselves and go wandering off and just have everyone else watch them. They're supposed to be following the instructions of the team. And the other cool thing about it that we'll get into a little bit later is that people can kind of come and go. If you're tired, if you've got a meeting you need to go to, or any of those sorts of things, you can leave the mob, come back into the mob later and sort of catch back up. So that's how it works procedurally, and I've swapped the order around a little bit because it's in my slides. And then, of course, the problem we're trying to solve is this refactoring. So basically what we did is we mobbed for about 2 weeks. We had a month. We knew we'd need a little bit of time to test this code because it wasn't very well unit tested as well. And it was a true refactoring we wanted to do. So it was completely behavior preserving. Hopefully we don't introduce any bugs, and we're going to break down this big thing. And what happened was that we got it done, which was significant because it was something we tried to do a bunch of times before. One of the great things that I found when you had 5 guys around the keyboard, all with a shared goal in mind, when people got tired or when people got fed up, you know, you could give them a hug and we could all draw on each other's strength to sort of keep going through this really difficult problem. So it was great with the specific problem we had. It worked really well. The same thing goes for the fact that sometimes you'd get to a part of the code base that you didn't know very well, which in other times you would have perhaps given up on, and this can be true of any sort of problem. Someone in the team though, chances are they've got some experience with that part of the code base and would sort of provide the knowledge needed at the right time for you to keep going on that sort of thing. So it worked really well for solving our specific problem, and it was fantastic to sort of get that result, and it's sort of allowing us to do a lot more with our code base now in terms of finding other problem areas now that it's a little bit easier to reason about. But there was a whole bunch of unexpected side effects for me as well. So I've got this great photo of my team up here, and there's 5 guys, and they're all standing around with different expressions on their faces. And what I wanted to talk about that too is that we've got a lot of disparate opinions on our team about how we should be structuring our code. We've got guys on the team who sort of been in the mines for a long time on this particular code base, and they like to write C# that's sort of like just sort of procedural code. I've got a lot of experience trying to write, encapsulated object-oriented C# code. We've got a new guy on the team who's really passionate about F#, and he wants us to write everything as static methods. And we've sort of all got these different ideas and pulling in these different directions, and all know that we need to be constantly refactoring this code base, but it's not happening. And when it does happen, it sort of goes in different directions. And what we found is that when we actually all got together around one keyboard and we had to talk about it, that all of these styles were actually compatible in different ways. And we agreed in different ways about how we would start with this style here and then refactor it to here over time. And we built this shared agreement and alignment and understanding about what we wanted our code to look like. We learnt the benefits of some of the styles that other people in the team were proposing, and we saw the pitfalls in some of the things we were proposing ourselves. And we very quickly sort of developed this shared vision and a really great sense of camaraderie and empathy in the team as well. We're working on code with people for 2 weeks at a time, every day for 8 hours, with breaks and stuff, of course. But it's a really good way of making the whole team start to pull in the same direction. To the point where once we finished this work, for a long time I'd been trying to build that behavior in the team of constant refactoring. And what I saw afterwards was, after the PR that fixed the bug or after the PR that built the feature, people were of their own accord doing a second one. And they were doing a second PR with a refactoring in it, and it was of a shared vision that the team had built together in that time. And all of that was something I wasn't aiming to get out of it, so it was a really nice surprise when all that stuff came out. And that did start to drop off over time again too. I think there's maintenance necessary on this, so whether you've got a great pairing practice already in the team, I think that might be enough to sustain this sort of thing. We don't have a great pairing practice, so I think we'll probably need to periodically mob to refresh and realign the team on where we're going as the space we're working in changes and as our ideas change over time and that sort of stuff. But it was really great that it at least did have that bump to start with. In terms of the mobbing itself and how it worked, so I talked a little bit about the procedural rules beforehand, and we followed a lot of those. We started with all of those rules, but the first thing we did is that we do a stand-up every morning to find out what everyone's working on. When you're all working on the same thing, you don't need to do that. So we replaced it with a retro, and what we specifically retroed was not a bit about the problem we were trying to solve, but much more on the procedural aspects of the mobbing. So every day we'd go, right, what worked yesterday, what didn't. One thing that we found worked really well and was super important was a 5-minute timer or less. If it got much over that, there was a greater chance of people becoming disengaged with what was happening, as well as the person on the keyboard actually starting to drive things a bit themselves and sort of not really working as a team. We did find though that it was very hard, even with a 5-minute timer, to stop that guy on the keyboard just taking off with things. And we couldn't find a good solution for this. It's just, I think it's a natural behaviour of developers to do that sort of stuff when they're sitting in front of a keyboard. So we implemented a rule where we basically just gave ourselves permission to tell people to stop doing that. It was the only solution we could. Hey, you're driving, you shouldn't be driving, don't do that. We also, though, realised that we needed to give that person a voice. So just because you're on the keyboard doesn't mean your opinion doesn't matter. So we sort of had a timeout rule where you could take your hands off the keyboard and engage the team in discussion so that you could still have your opinion on what was going on. You didn't just sort of get ordered around by the rest of the team. And then we'd continue again once that discussion was resolved. We also found that if there's less than 3 people, we called it quits, because so 5-ish was the number in the team, less than half the team there, and you started to get decisions being made that would be questioned later by people in the team. You'd start to get people taking it in directions that other people didn't agree with, or it would take a long time to catch up with afterwards. And the other thing that we did find about people coming and going in and out of the mob was that there was this relentless momentum that occurred. So in my day anyway, I spend a lot of time in and out of meetings. So I'm trying to get something done, I'm pairing with someone on a problem, and I have to go to a meeting, and I come back and they're sort of waiting for me to come back, or they don't know how to get the problem done next, or I'm trying to do something myself and I'm not really making progress on it because I keep context switching. When you've got brain swapping in and out, sort of like hot swapping in and out, the problem keeps getting solved. And so what I'd find is I'd go away to meetings and come back, and the next problem would be solved, and they'd be on to the next thing. I could sort of catch up, speed up, and keep going. So we actually moved quite quickly as well. I've had experience from, I've had conversations with other teams at PageUp who've done this as well, and sort of different kinds of problems where they were making their first Xamarin app. So they were sort of doing it zero with a Xamarin app, trying to get everything up and running and learning the framework for the first time. And they reported similar stuff. They'd estimated a whole lot of stories to get to sort of their Hello World app or whatever with everything they needed. And they got through it a lot quicker than they thought using mobbing. So I think that's about all I've got to talk about today. I did want to leave a bit of time at the end for questions, but I've probably used it about all up now. So if you've got any questions, yeah, maybe quickly.
Is there any reason you don't use mobbing for anything?
To be honest, I would like to do another experiment where the work wasn't like a specific problem that we were trying to solve, and do a little bit of a comparison of the velocity there. I'm still really worried about justifying velocity to other people. I'm not so worried myself about how productive it is, but being able to justify it. It's also really intensive. Like I did a bit of planning before we did this to make sure that we had good problems to solve and that sort of thing. So it's more thinking about how to make it more valuable and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
What's the good size of the team for?
We had 5. 5 worked really well. So I don't know, but I don't know what it would be like when it got larger.
Does this work with remote teams?
I've heard it does. I've not tried it remotely myself. We did have one guy remotely, and he works from home a few days a week, so he was there sometimes and sometimes not. So we screen shared with him. We had him on a video laptop at the front of the room as well, and he could follow along. It was harder to switch control over to him, so it's sort of really hard to get him that engaged. Yeah.
How do you find different personalities? You know, more dominant people.
Yeah. So,
how do you manage that?
just before I answer, you'll cut me off when we've got to go on to the next person, right?
I think, yeah.
Okay, all right. The short answer is we did have one person on the team who found it a little bit challenging, and we let him stop pairing. Stop